Welcome back, baseball fans. 1972-75 carryover league draft. We got first round draft results for you tonight. 72-75 league, 32 teams in the league. If you haven't seen this before, 24 Major League Baseball teams during the era. We've added 8 expansion teams. Most are familiar, some are fictional. But anyway, 32 teams in the league. Let's just get right into the action here, because there's a lot to talk about here. So without further ado, let's get going to the first round, first pick overall. The team on the clock is the Ohio Players, playing out of Dayton, Ohio, of course, where that famous band came from. They have a baseball team, and they, in the off-season, made a huge splash. They traded for Vida Blue, coming off of his 1971 MVP Cy Young with Oakland. Oakland got doubled up by getting Al Downing and Don Wilson for Vida Blue, with some other players involved in the deal. So, with the first pick in the draft, Oakland does select Vida Blue. He's 25 years old in 1975 as a 4-year deal, because it's 4 years out into the future from 71. 22-game winner. And frankly, he's never going to pitch as good as he does in 71 ever again. But he'll have an all-star career which lasts through the early 80s versus the careers of Don Wilson and Al Downing, who pretty much shut down by like 1975. So Oakland wanted the pitching for the dynasty years. Ohio wanted the long-range pitcher. Some other moves here. If you have the rights to a player in the same year you're selecting, you can announce the second pick in that year, which they have done. Larry Demiri, 1975 Demiri, 7-5, the 2.90 ERA with the Pirates. Very nice little year there for him. He's 22, his best year in his career, short career. He'll go to the bullpen. Nice little pick. And I also have one more pick for Ohio because it's the first pick of the second round. I snuck into the second round with one pick, and what they did was 74, they improved Lynn McLaughlin. Notice the shading here of green for an improved player. 16-12 with a 2.69 ERA, pitching on 3 days rest, arguably the best season for Lynn McLaughlin in 74. So 3 nice pitchers for the team with the worst record in the league a year ago. That's how they're going to try and make a comeback this year with pitching. With that, we'll go to the second team drafting, and it's the Florida Marlins, and they double up. They take Willie Montanez. 75 Montanez hit in a full season, hit .305, but just 8 home runs. Stellar defense, 1E10 at first base, a lefty who could hit lefties, 27 years old. Took him away from the Phillies, I believe, and the Phillies would have liked him, as you know, and that's timeline, so that hurts the division rival. They also had the rights to Tom Bergmeyer, a lefty setup guy who had some success with the Twins, the Royals, eventually Boston. He's got a 3.09 ERA in the year of 75. So Willie Montanez, Tom Bergmeyer, nothing flashy, but it's another expansion team, the Florida Marlins. All right, the third team on the clock, that surprisingly bad Kansas City Royals, a team we really liked, but they really had a horrible season, so they're drafting 3rd overall. They had a bunch of possibilities for the pick, including Patek, Rojas, Splittorff, Fran Healy. None of those seem like 3rd overall picks. So what they did was they internally improved George Brett. Hall of Famers always make good first-round picks. So they went from the 282 Brett of 74 to a 308 and a 1/3 baseman Brett of 75. So that's what Kansas City did, making George Brett a lot better. In a similar move with the 4th pick, the Texas Rangers, copycat, said, we got a guy we like. He's kind of like George Brett, sort of maybe. His name's Toby Harrah, 26 years old. We want him to get better. So they improved him to a 75 card. 20 homers, 93 RBIs, 23 stolen bases, and a .293 batting average. 861 OPS, can play short and third. What's not to like about that move? Texas Rangers internal improvements for a young team that's not expected to compete for the division title, we don't think. Drafting 5th, another expansion team, Las Vegas, and this is a clever move for them, and I'll explain why it's a clever move. From the 1975 box, and you've seen the pattern so far, everybody's taking guys from 75. Why? It's the first time this box has been opened, so it's full of talent. The 72 box is barren. That's why you're going to see 75s go much more frequently than the other years in the first round. But they finally cracked the seal on a rookie, or in this case an undrafted free agent, a guy who may have been in the league but not drafted into my league, so we consider him to be a rookie. Greg Gross, who in 74 and 75 played full seasons for Houston. He wasn't a pinch hitter then. He was a full-time outfielder. Las Vegas likes defense, and the other clever part of this move was Portland, a division rival, also had the rights to Greg Gross for a 74 card. It just depends on how the individual year drafts go. So each team had a right to take in this guy, but Vegas went first, and they said, we want to punch the ticket. We don't want to risk losing this guy to a division rival because he gives good outfield defense. He's a 294 hitter, and he has a nice 373 on base. A lefty who can hit lefties fine. Good guy to have at the top of the lineup there. And he joins a good defensive outfield with Ken Berry and Mike Anderson. So that's how Vegas built their team around defense. Drafting 6, and this is called no-brainer territory. The Boston Red Sox had a terrible year last year, and they had the 6th overall pick, which is stunning. So what happens? Well, you take Fred Lynn, 1975 MVP, 1-3 E8, arguably the best rookie season ever. 47 doubles, 21 homers, 105 RBI, a 331 average. They now have all ones in their outfield if they want to stick with Rick Miller in left, Dwight Evans in right. Boston gets their guy to get them out of last place, and Boston should be competing for their division. If you're wondering about the 75 World Series Red Sox, we're only in the first phase of that, as we just opened the box of 75 cards. It's going to take 3 years till they get all the pieces together for that team. So we're up to the 7th pick. Another perennial division star, the Dodgers, who had another terrible year. They decided to look into the keeper box. 2 guys they had in 71 they had the rights to, and they extended them. Andy Messersmith gets a 2-year contract, as does Willie Davis. Willie Davis suddenly has developed some pop late in his career at ages 32 and 33. He's got 19 homers in 72 and 16 in 73. He's got a 444 slugging. So he's still a 1 in center field as Willie Davis, and Andy Messersmith is in his prime. So great picks. Because they're both in 73, so we consider Messersmith to be a first-round pick, and Davis gets to be a 7th-round pick. Picking 8th, and a 3rd division stud, the Cincinnati Reds, who just fell apart last year after winning the World Series in the year previous. It was kind of like that 71 Reds team that was pretty bad between the 70 and 72 teams. Anyway, we're talking no-brainer territory. They're going to pop that 75 box open just like Boston did for Fred Lynn, because that's the World Series combatants. They got 75 Joe Morgan, 75 and 76 Joe Morgan cards, probably the 2 best cards in the whole decade. 1E13, 17 homers, a 327 average, a 974 OPS. I think he's got 20-some homers in 76. And they also added George Foster. They have to be extremely patient waiting on Griffey and Foster and all the rest of the pieces to arrive, because they still have Pete Rose in the outfield, and they also still have Bobby Tolan on the team. So you can't get Griffey yet. The plan is to add Foster this year with his 300 batting average and an 875 OPS. As a good defensive outfielder too, which is surprising. He wouldn't always be this good. And then next year they'll add Ken Griffey when Bobby Tolan's gone. So Boston, the Dodgers, and the Reds all have top 10 picks. That's never happened, I don't think, before. They just all flamed out last year. All right, the Seattle Mariners. Think about that. A fictional Seattle Mariners team, meaning that they don't exist until 1977. They actually were slightly better than the Dodgers, Red Sox, and Reds. Nice moves here. In the 75 box, they had an extra player card for Glenn Adams. Only 103 plate appearances. Expansion teams are the teams that select extra player cards because that's all they can get, because they just don't have a farm system because they don't exist, and they can't hide guys in the protection list like the Cincinnati Reds could hide Griffey, Foster, Geronimo, Concepcion, so forth. So they have the 103 at-bats for Glenn Adams, who played most of his career with the Giants and the Twins as a DH. This card hits 300 with an 856 OPS. And they doubled up by also selecting, they had the rights to Skip Lockwood, and he's got a 1.49 ERA now as a reliever. So he used to be a starter, went to one of my All-Star games representing Seattle. We liked Skip on Seattle as a Seattle skipper with Skip Pitlock. Trying to get all the skips on one team. Anyway, there you go. Glenn Adams, Skip Pitlock to Seattle. Colorado. They are Team 11. And so they also won the Commissioner Award, which means they had the 33rd pick, a pick between the first and second rounds. Commissioner Award is given to a team that utilizes its roster most efficiently from the previous season, and it was the Rockies, meaning that maximum innings pitched and plate appearances for all their players, whereas other teams, their weakest players don't play as much. So that you reward that team by giving them a comp pick between the first and second rounds. In the first round, they took Rick Monday, improving him. Anytime you see this light green color, it means they already have Rick Monday, but they want him to get better, and he does in 74. A 1, E5 in center field, 617 plate appearances, 842 OPS. Great year for Monday playing center field. With the Commissioner Award, they doubled up because they went to the 1973 box, and this is the first waivered player selected. 33rd overall. It's Sam McDowell, surprisingly. Sam in 73, he's got a 3.95 ERA in 95 innings. His whip isn't too bad, and he's a serviceable player at age 30. And so Colorado can need all the help they can get in the pitching. So they found a lefty. They didn't have any lefties, and now they got a guy, Sam McDowell. They also took Phil Gagliano, a utility infielder with usually a high batting average, 290, 402 on base for Phil Gagliano, and he'll be the utility player, move him all around. Expansion teams like to have utility players, guys who can play multiple positions, because they have to juggle their lineups. They just aren't as talented as the traditional major league teams. Picking 12th. This is an interesting pair of players, also from the 75 box. Arizona took a undrafted free agent rookie, Mike Vail. He was a 23-year-old member of the Mets. They also had the rights to Stevie Ray Braun, who could play second and third, had a full season for the Twins. Each of these players hit 302. How about that, folks? A couple of 302 hitters, adding to a team that prizes batting average. Not necessarily homers or walks or defense or starting pitching. They just like high batting average, and they have a bunch of guys like that. They probably will hit 280, 290. How many games they'll win, I don't know. But Vail and Braun don't bring you much defense or power, but they have a high batting average. Next up, the California Angels. This is a player I really liked in this era. It's Paul Shaw, 1973. He's the guy that George Brett would replace, so he had to find a new home. In 73, he had a fine year, 471 plate appearances for Kansas City, 288, 389 on base percentage, solid glove at third base. And they also added in the 7th round, Darren Johnson still could crush left-handed pitching. The plan is to platoon him with Mr. Jim Spencer. All right, drafting 13th, the Mets. No-brainer. Tom Seaver's on the keeper list, so he has to be your first-round pick. I always do that with Hall of Famers. He's 28 and 73. I think he gets a Cy Young. 2.08 ERA. The WHIP is .976. And so they also added Bud Harrelson as a 1E14 shortstop in 73. The plan is to select 72 Rusty Staub and Tug McGraw next draft, next second round. So they'll have the early years locked up, and they're going to need some young rookie blood in 74 and 75 to help the Mets out. Picking 14th, Milwaukee, and I got to say at this point of the draft, Milwaukee just did not have a lot of blue chip options here at 14 overall. So when you do that, often think about improving a player who's already on your roster, and that is the guy they did. They made Ollie Brown at age 31, who's a 3-3 E3 in right field. Find out he's got an 879 OPS that particular season with a 303 average. So 879 OPS is nothing to sneeze at, so that is their first-round pick. And they doubled up by also adding Pat Kelly. Good leadoff hitter. This particular version of Pat Kelly at age 30 can hit left-handed pitching, which is a real boon for this team. If you're wondering about the Brewers here, guys like Sixto Lezcano, Gorman Thomas, Charlie Moore, they're just not quite ready yet. They need some more seasoning, as does Robin Yount, for instance. So probably will be another subpar year for the Brewers. Drafting 15th, the Padres, and I love what they did. The Padres. They had Randy Jones, but they improved him to his 75 card, where he was a 20-game winner with a 2.24 ERA on 3 days rest. That will make the Padres a lot better, competing in a very tough division with the Dodgers, Giants, and Astros. Then they doubled up because they had this 26-year-old left-hander, Brent Strom, a 2.54 ERA in 120 innings. 2 outstanding left-handed starting pitching in one selection of the draft. So Padres, they moved Dave Roberts to the Houston Astros in the offseason. So they are set with left-handed pitching for a while with Randy Jones and Brent Strom. Good news for a Padre team. Maybe they've tried different formulas. Dave Winfield, by the way, if you're wondering, he really has just mediocre 73, 74, and 75. So we think we're going to go with the 73 Winfield, and then next year bump him up to the 76 Winfield. But I think Winfield will be on this team. Look at him later in the draft. Couldn't resist the Randy Jones pick. Technically, Randy Jones is statistically much better than Dave Winfield in this era. All right, now we have the 16th team, and we're halfway through the round. The aforementioned Dave Roberts, acquired in an off-season deal with the Padres. The other Dave Roberts, I like to say. San Diego still has the infielder. Houston has the left-handed pitcher now. 17-game winner, 2.85 ERA on 3 days rest. Houston had some of the worst left-handed pitching a year ago. They went out, made some deals. They acquired Steve Mangori and Dave Roberts. Now they're going to have some good left-handed pitching. They also, of course, made the big Joe Morgan deal in the offseason, which means Tommy Helms is in town. And actually, Tommy has a pretty good 1973. A 2E10 second baseman. Hits 287. Nice little player. But, of course, history would suggest the Reds needed Joe Morgan to become the big red machine, and so forth and so on. Okay. Halfway through here. 1 second. Okay. 17th, the Twinkies. All right, I like this. This is a bold move in that they did a double improvement. So they started this draft with 12 players, and they still have 12. But they couldn't resist improving Phil Roof and Larry Heisel to these particular cards. In the case of Roof, in a small sample size, 142 at-bats, he has staggering numbers for his career talent level. He's a 302, 353, 484, 837, which is ridiculous. He's got homers on 1, 5, 6, and 7 against righties. And this is the type of move the Twins need to make to be bold. They're just been stumbling along for most of this decade, pretending to compete for this division, and they just seem to run out of gas. So have some fun, make some of your players better. They also made Larry Heisel better, making him a 314 hitter with an 870 OPS. So the Twins, realizing that Oliva is getting older and Killebrew is getting older, they have to find some offense somewhere, and this is where they found it. So these are great cards for the Twins. Long-term success? Probably not. But at least for this time, the Twins are improved with the sticks. Cleveland Indians. Now, they were a big player in the offseason in the first base shuffle. I don't think I know exactly the entire... It's like this. So let's start with Cincinnati. Tony Perez played third. They moved him over to first. They shipped out first baseman Lee May, not to Houston. Houston didn't want him, so they sent him to Baltimore. Baltimore sent Boog Powell to Cleveland. Cleveland sent Chris Chambliss to the Yankees. And I forget who the Yankees moved out. I think they moved Ron Blomberg out. So Boog Powell is your pick for the Cleveland Indians, and you're wondering, Boog Powell? Yeah, folks, 75. 1975. He's 33 years old. Kind of run out of Baltimore a little bit because of Lee May and eventually Eddie Murray. Best year since his MVP season in 1970. He finds the fountain of youth in 75 at age 33. A full season, no fluke here for Boog. 27 bombs, a 297 batting average, 901 OPS. That's a 4-year contract, folks, for 75. Great news for Boog Powell and the Cleveland Indians. And they doubled up by improving Frank Duffy just to get him to be a 2 shortstop, a 2E19 shortstop, even though the stick's not particularly good. And nice move. If you have the opportunity to do something like that, get a 2 at short, go ahead. That'll win you postseason games. Good defense will in the middle infield. Next team up is the Cardinals, and there was a bunch of different options here. By the way, it's not shown here, but in 1975, Al Hrabowski and Ted Simmons have monster seasons, and they will improve those in a future round. But in the first round, they couldn't resist Lou Brock's monster stolen base year. You see these double pound signs? That's because it's triple digits. Let me see if I can expand this column a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. There they are. So that is, yes, 3 digits. 118 stolen bases for Lou. 306 batting average. I had to get the AAA card in there at age 35. 35-year-old man stealing 118 bases. Wow. That's not as surprising as Willie Mays, 40 years old, being a 2-2 in center field. But fountain of youth, folks. Different era of baseball. Lou Brock. He's the first-round pick, and they doubled that up. Interesting. They jumped on Bob Force. They could have got him in 75, but he's in a starting rotation there. They got too many starters, not enough relievers, so they're going to go with 74 Force, where he pitches 100 innings. He can pitch out of the bullpen. That's saving the spots to get Hrabowski and Ted Simmons in their monster years. So this is a really smart move by the Cardinals to get Lou Brock. Add Bob Force to your roster. You don't need him to pitch on 3 days rest yet, and you're still going to get Simmons and Hrabowski into their best years ever. So that is some foreshadowing for good things for the Cardinals. Good for them. They just missed the playoffs a year ago in the National League. And speaking of just missing the playoffs, the Expos. They started last year 16-3, and they slumped at the end, and they missed out. They have some nice players, pitchers set up for 72 and 73, including Bill Stoneman, Steve Renko, and they traded for Dave McNally a little bit sooner than they would have traditionally. Those pitchers are coming, but they decided to go with the young kids. 21-year-old Gary Carter and 22-year-old Jerry White. You got a catcher who can also play right field, can also play third base. You got an outfielder who can play all three positions. Jerry White, it's .299 with a .787 OPS. Gary Carter is a .416 slugging. No-brainer there for getting Gary Carter to the Expos ASAP. Because they only had John Boccabella on the roster. They cut John Bateman. So, Expos, very clever moves there. Next up, we begin one of the 12 playoff teams a year ago. The Portland team, the team that won the Mountain Time Zone division. An expansion team automatically wins that division. It's comprised, of course, of Arizona, Colorado, and Las Vegas. Portland won it a year ago. They had the rights to a couple guys they decided to select. They ended up with Ron Blomberg. No room at the end in New York for Ron as Chambliss took over at first base. We have a designated hitter in the National League, so Portland said, give us this guy. .329 batting average for Blomberg in 73. And 37-year-old Frank Robinson still can 630 plate appearances, 30 bombs, 97 RBI at 266, 372, 489, 861. So Portland's got some famous guys here. They went after Frank Robinson like 3 years ago to sell some tickets, just like Ohio went after Vida Blue, get a Hall of Famer or a superstar on the franchise, something to build around. Frank Robinson got. By the way, Frank Robinson, Baltimore, he was on that team that won a World Series. They traded him to Cleveland first. Cleveland won their division. And then Cleveland traded him to Portland, and Portland won their division. So you trade for Frank Robinson, you win the division. Cincinnati Reds, Baltimore Orioles. After the Orioles, traditionally he went to the Dodgers, and then he went to the Angels and the Indians and became the Indians manager. We'd like to get Frank Robinson and Boog Powell in Cleveland in another year or so. How about the Cubbies? Oh, this is a really clever move. So, Fergie Jenkins had the name recognition of a first-round pick, Hall of Famer, so I had to go for him. But what I did was I went with 74 when he was a Texas Ranger. And you're going to ask, well, that's not really fair. Texas would have loved to have Fergie. Well, guess what, folks? Texas will have Fergie, and so will the Cubs. Fergie Jenkins has 2 separate stints for the Cubs and 2 separate stints for the Rangers. So what I decided to do was extend Fergie in Chicago with a Texas card, and then later in the early 80s, I'll put him on the Rangers with a Chicago Cubs card. So that's the plan, the long range plan for Fergie Jenkins. 25-game winner, 2.82 ERA, 328 innings, and this will be the final Cub card in 74, and then we'll move him to the Rangers. Possibly skipping that tenure with the Red Sox. Not sure how that's going to work out. I think Boston's going to have too many right-handed pitchers anyway. All right. The Yankees did something unique finally in the first round, and you're wondering what's unique. They took a player from the 1972 season, the much maligned season of bad batting average. Bobby Mercer's probably one of the only players who had a fantastic 71 and 72. Both years were magnificent. So once we got out of the 71 card, we went straight to the 72 card at age 26. He's your E3 -2 in center field. He has 33 home runs. He's got an 898 OPS. That's no-brainer territory. Plus they have Elliot Maddox in right field as a 1-3 arm. And they doubled up with their 8th round pick by taking Greg Nettles, mostly because he's a 2 at third base. And believe it or not, Greg is actually a 3 in years 3, 4, and 5. So the plan is 1 year out of this Nettles card, and then they'll take that 76 Nettles card that the Yankees used as he went to the World Series, and he also led the American League in home runs, believe it or not, with like 32. So that's the plan for the Yankees. 1 year with a 72 card, and then 4 years next year with a 76 card. Toronto Blue Jays, the darlings of a year ago. They were Cinderella. They were the team that got into the playoffs. They got into the wild card round against the big bad Oakland A's. Won the first 2 games in Oakland, then they dropped the next 3 disappointingly. But they gave Oakland a run for their money. Everything went perfect for Toronto. They had a very weak roster, but they won a lot of tough games. And it's going to be tough to get back to the playoffs after what they accomplished. You saw the Boston Red Sox drafting 6th. Well, that's what happened. Boston had a horrible, horrible slump, and Toronto had the luckiest year of any year. A lot of wins. One of those playoff teams whose Pythagorean was a losing record, you could say. Anyway, they doubled up with some nice picks here. They had the rights to 75 Jerry Royce, and they improved him to his Pirate year of 75, his best year with Pittsburgh. No biggie, because Pittsburgh needs to make room for John Candelaria anyway, so they really have no room for Jerry Royce and Candelaria. So Royce will probably go from Toronto and eventually show up with the Dodgers. And the latest New York Met to come to Toronto. If you've been following my league, you have seen older Met hitters, when they want to throw them in the recycle bin, they ship them to Toronto. It was Tommy A.G. 3 years ago. Then it was Don Clendenon 2 years ago. And now they shipped Ed Kranepool to the Blue Jays, who, by the way, Ed Kranepool was a lifetime New York Met. Not a lot of lifetime New York Mets who play for that franchise for 10 plus years, believe it or not. Kranepool, 323, 779 OPS. Great pick for the Blue Jays. Next up, for the Giants, this is a Hall of Fame pick. I could have gone to different seasons, but I had to go Willie Mays, Juan Marichal, both with the same pick. Mays will be the first-round pick. Marichal is the second pick from that season, so he's an 8th-round pick. Willie Mays is 41 years old. That is the correct defense. He's a 2, -2 E9 in center field. My goodness. Still, this is the last decent year for Willie in 240 plate appearances. 267, 402, 446, 848. And Marichal, this is his last good year. So, changing of the guard soon for the Giants. They've got some young talent in the minor leagues just chomping at the bit to get to the majors. But they have to wait till Willie Mays and Juan Marichal retire. The White Sox, they got younger. There was a team who got younger earlier here. Who was it? It was the Expos with Gary Carter and Jerry White. Well, the White Sox did something very similar to that. In the year of 75, they doubled up with Rich Gossage and Brian Downing. Gossage will immediately be the closer. They've been waiting on Gossage. He's had a card since 72. 72, 3, and 4 weren't so much for the Hall of Famer. 75 card is amazing. 184 ERA in the bullpen. He will be the closer. Bart Johnson will move back into the rotation. And they added Brian Downing, who, check it out, folks, this is a -1 arm for Brian Downing. So that's very rare. Normally he's got a +1 or +2 arm. High on base percentage, 356 on base for Brian Downing. So, yeah, there's a battery mate for you, Gossage to Downing. All right, next up, the Oakland A's. And we talked about the trade with the Ohio players, Vida Blue and McLaughlin. And so Oakland immediately punches a ticket for a 4-man rotation. They took Al Downing, pitching on 3 days rest. He pitched in the Winter Baseball Classic tournament very well, and that kind of colored my opinion that he's really good in that particular year. He was very impressive, so that's why I took him over another option that had similar stats. And Don Wilson also in 72. So both 72 guys. This also allows the A's to potentially get out of the Downing and Wilson contracts if it doesn't work out. They're one-year contracts, and they have to go through the same process of the entire rotation will have to be improved in the off season. And by entire rotation, I mean Catfish Hunter, Ken Holtzman, Don Wilson, and Al Downing. 2 lefties and 2 righties. Everybody can pitch on 3 days rest. That's probably the best 4 starters in the American League. On a loaded Oakland team, they have gone to 1 World Series. They didn't win it, and they're trying to start the dynasty years now. And this is the solution. Downing and Wilson instead of Vida Blue. All right, we got 4 teams left. The Atlanta Braves, well, 73 Hank Aaron. That was no-brainer. He's 39 years old. They moved him to left field. He hits 40 home runs alongside Davey Johnson and Darrell Evans. 301, 1045 OPS for Hank Aaron, the only selection from the year of 73. Baltimore, another Hall of Famer. No, Philadelphia, excuse me. Philadelphia's next. 2 guys from 75. They took Jay Johnstone with his 329 year, and they improved Greg Luzinski to a 300 year with a 934 OPS and 34 home runs. So Philadelphia says, look, we'll find pitching, but we are known as a team that can bash. So Johnstone and Luzinski can bash. We have a DH in the National League now, so Luzinski can be the DH. Johnstone can be in the outfield with Gary Maddox. And Johnny Callison has 1 year left in Philadelphia. All right, next up is Team 30, Baltimore. And here's a Hall of Famer. Brooks Robinson, 1/19. This is really going to be Brooks's 1974, Brooks' last good year with a stick. He actually hits .288. Which is the highest batting average in at least a decade. Not a lot of power. 7 home runs, but his card gives him power both ways, which is helpful. Always a B hit and runner. Of course, you're the 1 third baseman. .288 average. Nice card in 74 for Brooksy. And Baltimore does more Baltimore stuff with their pitching staff. They had the rights to Wayne Garland, so they took him now as a reliever with a .297 ERA. And what's the whip on him again? 103 whip and a .297 ERA. Wayne Garland's going to win 20 games in 1976. So Baltimore just keeps restocking the pitching staff. Garland will be in the bullpen for a few years. All right, now we are at the World Series participants. The runner-up, the Detroit Tigers. Of course, they're going to age like fine wine. How many times have you heard me say this on this channel about the Detroit Tigers? They just don't get old. They're gone Al Kaline, Norm Cash. Because Al Kaline's 37 years old and he's a 2-2 in the outfield and he hits 313, 849 OPS. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. Norm Cash, 32 home runs and a .283 batting average at age 36. Unbelievable production. This is the 68 Tigers over and over and over and over and over again, running it back 4, 5, 6 years now. They lost the World Series to the Pirates. They've been into 3 World Series. Let's see. They beat the Dodgers in a World Series. They lost to the Mets, and they lost to the Pirates in the World Series. So they are in their own division in the American League North, so they don't have to compete against the Orioles, Red Sox, and Yankees. And that gets them closer to the playoffs. And last but not least tonight, the world champion Pittsburgh Pirates. This is a case where I actually did match the 1971 team to winning the 71-74 World Series. It's always gratifying when I get a match like that. It's happened a few times. And they won it. And Steve Blass won Game 7. As a matter of fact, it was just against Detroit instead of Baltimore. But no-brainer here. Just one pick for them. They just took 73. Willie Stargell His 71 year was insane. He had 1,000 OPS, 1,050, maybe 1,100. Well, in 73, he's got 1,038 OPS. He has 44 home runs, a 299 average. I could care less about him being a 4 in the outfield as long as he got a -4 arm to go with it, which is something you very seldom ever see in Strat, a 4 -4. So that is the first round of the draft. We'll come back with individual rounds, second, third, and fourth, and then a draft summary after that. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next time.